My call to missions began about 1 o'clock in the morning in a girl's dorm. I was filled with God's Spirit. There was like a new sensitivity to his activity in my life. The gospel does not come without confrontation because it opposes the mindset of this world. At least I told you the gospel. Like I've done my part.
Yeah.
But really you haven't, because that wasn't good news to them. Wow. That was you just throwing something religious at them. Good news to them is that.
All right, today we are on with amazing man of God, missionary to Germany, and the only Protestant priest I've ever met. We're on with Kirk Priest today, so we appreciate you.
We're gonna clap it up for him. Get a little clap track going.
There's a clap track.
That's all right.
Yeah, we can't hear it. Just show that it's happening.
Nope, it's just like, sometimes you're not sure what God's doing, but you're trusting that he's working behind the scenes.
That's right.
Come on, Pastor.
Hey, well, good morning, guys. It's a joy to be with you.
Yeah, bright and early.
Yeah.
I know.
Granted, I mean, what time is it in Germany right now?
Right now, it is 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
Oh, so you're good.
Yeah, and I'm still jet lagging, so it's all right.
So
I'm ready for my afternoon coffee.
Hey, look, I'm down with you. but I have an energy drink right now, so yeah.
I can't do it.
All right, let's just dive straight in. So you're a missionary in Germany. How do you go from, kid growing up in the States to a missionary overseas?
Oh man, that's a great question. It's not. I think it's probably different for everybody. I know some missionaries that say things like, I was at camp at 9 years old and God called me to Zimbabwe, or God called me to China or something. Yeah. That's not my story. I didn't want anything to do with ministry, let alone missions, when I was a teenager, and even when I first got into college. It just was not on my radar. But it was a process. And I really believe that my call to missions began when I let's say it this way, probably 1 o'clock in the morning in a girl's dorm room.
That's
oh wow,
a descriptive.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Yeah, right.
I need you to explain that one.
Yeah, let me unpack that one.
Some guys are gonna be listening like,
oh yeah,
hallelujah.
And Austin says not to go to my girlfriend's dorm room.
Exactly. So it was actually after a Chi Alpha meeting, and about 10 of us went over to this girl's dorm room, and we just kind of continued the atmosphere of what was happening at that Chi Alpha meeting. So before your mind goes down the wrong track.
Okay, thank you.
But it was awesome because the girl's roommate was on the phone. And back in those days, this was like before cell phones, and you had like a telephone that was attached to a leash, and that leash was like 10, 12, 15 feet long. Yeah. She went out in the hallway and was talking really loud and saying like, man, the occult is meeting in my room, or a cult is meeting in my room. So all these people were like, what? And they started jamming into this dorm room. And before you know it, we had like 20 or 30 people in a single dorm room. We're spilling out into the hallways, and all of us from Calvary are talking about Jesus and sharing with people. And the RAs came through, and they said, hey man, where's the alcohol? Where's the drugs? We're like, we don't have that. We just got Jesus. And they told us we had to shut the door, and those that could fit inside could stay. We did. And that night, about a half a dozen people got saved, and another half a dozen people got baptized in the Holy Spirit, and I was one of them. And when I was filled with God's Spirit for the first time in my life, there was like a new sensitivity to his activity in my life. And I began to actually ask God, what do you want to do with my life? Should I just be pursuing this or pursuing that? And the first thing that God told me to do was not to continue studying political science. I wanted to be a politician.
Really?
Oh, I could see it.
He didn't tell me. He didn't tell me what to do. He just told me what not to do.
Wow.
And I took my first step of obedience and changed my major.
Really?
What'd you change it to?
I changed it to history because I liked history, but he didn't tell me what to do, so I just went with what I liked.
You just knew what not to do.
I just knew what not to do. And I feel like that's how God is, in that if you are in motion, it's easier for him to redirect you if you are already doing something. If you're just sitting around waiting for marching orders, they're usually not going to come.
Sure.
He's looking for somebody that's already engaged. And so that, I think that first step of obedience was was the beginning of a process. My call to missions was saying yes in that small thing. And then God says, okay, I can trust you with that. And then he trusts me with the next thing. And it's saying yes and saying yes and saying yes.
Yeah.
And that way, when I was called to go not only into ministry, but overseas into missions, I could say yes. I could give God my yes because I was already in the habit of giving God my yes.
Well, that's dope.
Yeah.
I do want to, like, for you to, like, you know, you want to be a politician, and then for God to tell you no.
Yeah.
But not tell you what to do.
Oh, it's so frustrating, man.
Like, that's
Yeah.
That's a whole nother level, like, of obedience that you have
Right.
to be, like, called to and trust in. Because, like, even for me, like, I went to school for chemical engineering, and then by the time it's like my senior year, the Lord's like, yeah, no. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? Like, why you didn't tell me that before?
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And
Before I went
Exactly.
through organic chemistry. Like,
exactly. And then failed it.
Yeah.
And then took it again.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, went
Yeah.
through all that. But one thing that did help me was God gave me, as I like to call, I got this from Christine in our conversation with her, like a holy pivot. You know, and it was just like,
Yeah, I like that.
instead of this.
Right.
But to not have a holy pivot, to be like, God just closing a door, I feel like that takes a whole level of like spirit. So I'm a little surprised, and I admire that at a early stage of a believer, for you to be able to receive a rejection without a separate calling and
Yeah.
still be able to walk in faithfulness.
Yeah, and I think it was because my experience that night, you know, it's 1:00 in the morning and I experienced something with God and he touched my life. I was radically transformed in that moment. And I knew that something had shifted inside of me. And so for him to speak that to me, it was kind of like he just had laid all the groundwork for it to happen.
Yeah.
You know?
So actually, all right, you said like you had this experience, you had this encounter with God.
Yeah.
And it's like last night I'm thinking and praying through this as well. It's like looking across the auditorium, 1,500 people, and it's like so many of these students are having radical encounters with God.
Right.
And I know I've been there before. And I also remember at times saying like, I'm never going back.
Right.
I'm never like,
Right.
this is yes, God. I'm never saying no. And then like, you know, that the feeling dies down, the emotion dies down.
Oh, yeah.
And then the no's start coming.
Yeah.
So how did you remain faithful to the yes even after the encounter?
Well, I think
What's up, Kingdom Come family? Sorry to interrupt the podcast. I just wanted to say thank you so much for being a part of this journey with us. If you're watching on YouTube, if you could just take 1 second and press that like button and press the subscribe button, it will help us grow substantially. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you listen to your podcast, just take 1 second, make sure you're following, and make sure to go leave a 5-star review. It helps us so much in the algorithm to get this show in front of more people so they can be a part of the Kingdom Come family and encounter the kingdom of God everywhere they go. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
I think, you know, I always say, for years I was a Chi Alpha campus pastor, and I would tell my students the power of salt is always on January 2nd. It's not on January 1st.
Yeah.
Because it's how are you gonna gonna live this out? You come down from this mountaintop experience, and then you got to grind it out. You got to, first of all, I think what's powerful is for people to know you're not doing it alone.
Yeah.
That's why you got community.
Yeah.
You got other people to help keep you accountable. You got other people that are there to encourage you. But the second thing is, at the end of the day, you are responsible
Yeah.
to seek the Lord. You
That's
are
right.
You are the one who's responsible to seek God and to be faithful and to really work out your salvation. I really think that's kind of what Paul is saying is you've got to walk through the times where there's not a lot of light.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, you get up in the middle of the night and you're walking in the dark, but you know that you're going to find the bathroom light switch eventually.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You're going to
for
get
sure.
there. You may bump into some things,
Yeah.
but you don't quit. You don't get discouraged and go back to bed or something worse is going to happen. You know,
Right,
it's like,
right,
you
right.
got to
No,
go
for
find your
sure.
way. But you get through and you push through because you have faith believing that God is going to give you the light when you need it. So that's why even in the dark, you can keep moving forward.
Wow.
And I think even in that struggle and the challenge, and that's just a Christian walk.
No, No, for sure. Because it's like there's going to be people who are listening who are like, I don't know what the salt thing is. And it's like, just your emotional encounter. Like the spiritual encounter that we've had.
Spiritual high is that you might be having.
Because it's like those are good.
Yeah.
Like we want those things, but we can't be sustained by those things.
For sure.
Like I was talking to somebody last night. It's almost like it's gas. Like our relationship with God's kind of like a campfire. Yeah. And like those retreats, those times where we just have like, man, intimate connection with God is kind of like the gasoline that makes the fire roar. But if you don't keep feeding that thing, the word of God, community, and like the prayer, all of these disciplines and things that we ought to do, the fire will go out.
No, maintaining salt high like was so difficult for me. So to go from, because for me, like I went to UL Lafayette. So UL Lafayette was where I felt spiritually edified. And for the longest, New Orleans was spiritually draining. Every time I would go home, I feel spiritual. So then I would go from being on campus to like a month away from my friends, stuck at home, get to salt. God is so good, incredible. Then go back to that spiritually dead place. Right. And it was really, really difficult not having any community to be able to continue to like build that up after salt. And I think that that's really important, that we do learn like healthy disciplines and habits, and then having community to sustain these runs as we go as believers.
And you're building those habits because you're going to take that with you the rest of your life. This isn't just something that you do to get through the college years. You're laying a foundation and you're building something so that when you move away to a new city because of a job, or you find yourself in a difficult place later in life, in marriage, in family, in all these relational dynamics, you're going to be in a similar situation of feeling like this is a spiritual desert where I'm at. How do I get back to finding the oasis? That never ends. That will be with you your whole life. And I feel like that's
just what the desert is changes.
The desert, it's just the geographical location changes, but the experience is the same of the people of God trying to find a way to be dependent on the Lord and make it through that wilderness.
Wow. That's powerful. Is that why you moved to the West Bank? Is because New Orleans was spiritually draining? I'm messing with you. You're from New Orleans, right?
No.
Where are you from?
No, I grew up in Michigan.
Okay, wait, I didn't know
so
this.
My mom was from Louisiana, my dad's from Michigan. And I grew up in Michigan. So, this is kind of the funny thing. You're talking about, you said this earlier, Derek. Why did God, like, why did this happen? And it feel like maybe it was a waste of time, or you said something like that a few minutes ago. I changed my major to history, and I still needed a foreign language. So I was taking some German classes because on my mother's side, it's like German heritage. So I thought, German is in the blood. This is gonna be
you got to
easy.
do it.
Oh, man, that was stupid. Because language don't work that way.
I took 3 years of German in high school because my brother told me it was fun. I hated it, bro. My final exam, my junior year, it's like my last time taking it. I was cool with my teacher. Instead of studying for my final, I made her a puzzle of Germany out of wood because, like, I like woodworking. I hate studying. So I made her a puzzle and then drew her a picture of our class on the final, and she passed me.
That's fire.
She wasn't German. She was American.
No. Yeah, she was American.
So I ended up taking a bunch of German classes, and I did really well.
Yeah.
And eventually I made it my minor, and then I made it a double major. And so I actually graduated with a bachelor degree in German studies. Wow. And then when I said yes to going into full-time ministry and working with Chi Alpha, I wound up in Lafayette, Louisiana. Yeah. And I remember getting there and sitting there being so frustrated and saying, Jesus, this makes no sense. I just spent 5 years. I basically crammed a 4-year degree into 5. Took me a while to get out. But I just got my bachelor.
He crammed it into an extended period of time.
I've got a secular degree, and now you're calling me into ministry.
Yeah.
Why didn't you call me to Bible school? That was a real frustration. And then I wind up in South Louisiana, and I go, I studied German. I could have studied French. And I was like,
now
God,
I really wasted it.
You got all this wrong. And there was I spent almost a whole year of my internship in Lafayette wrestling with this, going, Lord, you got this wrong. First about the ministry thing. And I always just kept that in my back pocket of going, man, God, you just really, you blew it on this one.
You messed that up, yeah.
But fast forward 7 years later, then he calls me to be a missionary to Germany. And it all makes sense.
Wow. So, like, how many? You said how many years later it was going
it was
to Germany?
7 years later that we were off to Germany as missionaries. Yeah.
All right, and so how does that door open real quick? And then so like now, what does it look like for you to walk through that, and where are you at with it now?
Yeah, so we've been talking about salts and stuff in this conference with Chi Alpha, and it's amazing. God spoke to me at a salt conference and called me into full-time ministry.
Yeah.
Then I had to wrestle through that, and then wound up understanding that he meant that with Chi Alpha. And so then I became a campus pastor, was at LSU for 5 years as campus pastor. And man, we were happy there. We had great ministry was going on. Things were good. We would take mission trips and teams, and I would take teams of students from LSU to Germany. Wow. And I get my fix. I could get my pretzel, my schnitzel, and
you could speak a little German.
Language.
People actually understand.
We did our mission thing, and it was awesome.
Of course.
But my wife was pregnant, and we just bought a house, and the ministry was going great. And I was at another SALT, and at that SALT, it was it was a precursor to World Mission Summits. It was called the World SALT. It was in Los Angeles, wow. And while there was like a world prayer meeting where people were being called into all these different vocations, whether it was marketplace or the mission field. Yeah. And somebody came up to a microphone and said the word Germany, and when they did, the Holy Spirit hit me like a ton of bricks, and I just knew that God was speaking to me in that moment. And he clearly said, now is the time to go to Berlin and to plant Chi Alpha there. Wow. And I had to go and tell my pregnant wife,
that you just
I feel like the Lord just spoke to us. And she said, I don't think that's God. So we're praying about it. But there were some missionaries at that conference from Germany. Mm-hmm. And we knew who they were. They'd come and spoke at our Chi Alpha group before in salts and stuff. And I said, can we sit down and talk with you guys? And they said, sure. And I just started sharing with them. I said, I feel like the Lord is speaking to us about Germany. And that missionary looked at me, and he pointed his finger at me, and he said, I know. Ooh. I stood in the back of the room last night. I saw you on stage, and I prayed for you. And I said, God, we need Kirk and Amy in Berlin. Would you call them to Berlin? Whoa. Wow. And Amy's like, oh, shoot. Right. Oh, no. We got to go now, So it was like, that was such a clarion call that we knew, okay, here's coming another holy pivot, as you said. We're changing directions.
For sure.
It's so beautiful how God is faithful to confirm his calling.
Exactly.
It's like, cause that happened for me where it was like, oh, God, are you calling me into ministry? And it was like, I knew, but I was like, such a big step. God, can you really confirm it? And he made sure I knew that was what he called me to. And in this case, you couldn't deny that any longer.
You couldn't deny it. Yeah. It was confirmed in such a powerful way.
So I have a question. Do you have to be called to go into ministry?
I believe that we are all called to be on mission for God.
That's a good answer.
And I believe that God has specific assignments for us. Yeah. And so I think sometimes when we use this word calling, really what we're saying is God's got an assignment for you, because everybody's called to be on mission.
Sure.
But there are certain specialized assignments in the kingdom of God, and one of them is going into cross-cultural missions work. Yeah. So when I say called into missions, what I'm referring to is that assignment is where you need to go and learn another language and learn another culture to reach a people group that otherwise is not going to hear. Yeah. And that's really what we mean by this word missions.
Yeah. No, that's good. And so actually I want to ask you about that, because you were like, for you, it was going across cultures. Yeah. And I think sometimes American missionaries get the reputation specifically from people who aren't Christian, who, you're just going over there to colonize and make them American.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, what was your job going over to Germany? Like, obviously it's not like you're going to like somewhere where it's just like complete poverty, but correct the stigma of you're just bringing American culture to another place.
Yeah, I think that because that's really the first task of a cross-cultural missionary, is to begin to learn how this other people groups think. You're not trying to make them into your culture. You need to be embedded in theirs. Mm-hmm. You've got to, not necessarily that you become one of them, but you almost need to become one of them in order to reach them.
For sure.
Because you have to be able to communicate the gospel in their heart language, and you have to be able to package it in a way that it is good news to them. Yeah. And that may be different from culture to culture as to how they understand and how they receive the gospel. And so if what we're doing is just trying to go over and even in our idea, we're going to go plant Chi Alpha in Berlin. Well, I'm not planting a Chi Alpha that looks like Chi Alpha at UL.
Yeah.
In its packaging.
Yeah.
But I do want to carry the values and the principles and that we're there to disciple people and build the kingdom.
Yeah.
But we've got to do this in a German way.
Yeah.
Or you got to do it in a Spanish way. Or you got to do it in a, a Nigerian way.
Yeah.
This is the trick or the challenge of missions is finding a way to really do incarnational ministry. But that is what Emmanuel is all about. It's God becoming one of us, and we've got to take missions is taking the gospel and being and becoming a part of where it goes.
Yeah.
Not trying to culturally colonize people,
Right.
like how
does
they
it look
dress or how they act.
Yeah,
and
I'm
those
about to
kinds of
say, like,
things.
how does it look different? Like, what's different?
Yeah.
Not the German Jesus versus the American Jesus,
No,
but like,
no.
Like,
as
Jesus
far
the
as
same, yeah.
How
Jesus the same.
German people connect with Jesus, I feel like it's different. I'm assuming, or like, yeah, how is it different as far as their relationship with God? Because I feel like Americans have certain struggles where they may think of Jesus like Santa. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, give me. You know what I'm saying? I want salvation, and like, I wonder, like, how is it different over in Germany?
Yeah, I think that as a whole, there's an undercurrent that runs through all of Europe that we call secularism, and that is something that is very defining to the culture all across Europe. Secularism basically means that neither God nor gods are at the center, but self is at the center. And I don't mean that people are selfish, but what I mean is, what is the highest moral authority in your life? It's yourself. So if God is a part of your life, he's just an accessory.
Yeah.
He's like one of many things that might influence your decision, but at the end of the day, you are the one who makes the decisions about your life. And at the end of the day, you got to take that responsibility as a secular person. But here's the other thing. At the end of the day, it's just you.
Yeah.
And that means not only have you got to, carry the responsibility of what you're doing for finding your way through life, you're crushed by that weight.
Yeah.
There is no higher being or supernatural experience that's going to help you get through that, because you don't believe there really is one. You think there's just you and the rest of the universe. And so I think that in communicating the gospel and what speaks to people, we're not trying to we don't do as much attractional stuff. People over there are not, they think that's very American, big crowds and that kind of stuff. Okay.
Not feeling it.
I'm not feeling it on a day-to-day basis. They're still going to go to a Taylor Swift concert. Okay. And they want the rah, rah, rah of that. They want the show and the pageantry at that.
Right.
But they're going to go not because, of all of the advertising and other people got them all stirred up about it, but because they want to be there. And I think the same thing with when we're doing ministry, so much more of it is relational, very, very relationship driven.
Yeah. Wow. So like when you got there, what was the greatest challenge you faced because like it's not you're bringing your culture to them, it's you're integrating yourself to their culture and being with them. What was the greatest challenge you faced in doing ministry to these people who, I mean, you studied their culture, you studied their language, but now you're in it?
Yeah, it really took us 2 years to even feel like we could get to first base. Let me just using a baseball analogy.
Yeah,
like,
I'm about to say first base. What do you?
I'm saying, like, to really even get anything started.
Yeah,
because we were trying all these things. I had all these ideas, and it really took finding an insider. I needed to have my first German student who really understood how German students thought and acted and what reached them.
Right.
Yeah.
And it took us until year 2 to find that. And then that was my key student leader. And then we began to gain some traction in reaching people because we began to do things that weren't just American.
Yeah, for sure.
We were doing things that were actually speaking to today's student.
No, 100%.
And now even today, I mean, it's almost 25 years later. Okay. We've been there 23 years.
Wow.
And so even today, I have to always remind myself that what we were doing on the German campus even 20 years ago may or may not be what is going to work on campus today. But I think you could say the same thing about the United
No,
States.
100%.
Ministry changes and things like that.
I mean, Pastor Eric used to put a coffin in the middle of the quad. Like,
Right.
I think I helped carry that coffin.
Let's go.
I remember doing that, yeah. So that's the thing. It's like you're constantly, but I think that's what apostolic work is. You're moving from one place to another, and you're trying to find out what is going to speak to this culture. We see that through the book of Acts. We see how Paul was doing that, and different things reached different people.
yeah.
But you can boil it all down to kind of 2 or 3 different ways.
Yeah.
And most people are going to be reached either this. They're wrestling with guilt, and they come from a guilt-based culture, and so they are looking for forgiveness. Others are coming from a shame-based culture, and they are looking to be made right with they're carrying this weight of shame, and so they need to be redeemed. Yeah. Okay. And then others come from a culture that has to deal with power or deliverance. And so they're either in bondage or they're seeking things that are going to set them free from spiritual powers. And we find this all over the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're either wrestling with the guilt or you're wrestling with shame or you're in bondage. And when you look at how Jesus approached people in the New Testament, it's one of those 3 ways that he's usually ministering to people.
Yeah.
He's either forgiving them, or he is redeeming them and their identity, or he sets them free. But that is salvation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's bound up a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
at the end of the day, the gospel is Jesus forgives, he redeems, and he sets free.
Beautiful.
And so almost the human condition around the world is going to fall into one of those 3 categories.
Yeah.
And I would say that for the European today, so much of it is that they don't feel guilty about stuff. They're not carrying around this guilt complex. I think American culture has a lot more to do with guilt and
I agree.
and the right and wrong, but it's what you're predisposed to. But this element of identity and relationship and this shame element of being restored or being made right or being a right person is very, very powerful. And that speaks to a lot of today's Europeans.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's like, all right, you said like they don't feel guilty about it. And because it's like, if they're so secular that, because I think
there is no judge.
Exactly. There's no, because like in American culture, it's like at least most people have a framework for God, sin, the 10 Commandments, all of those things.
Right.
And it's like, so I feel guilty about these things. If you're like, bro, I don't care, I don't believe, or I'm uncertain. There's no judge, so I can do what I want. So why would I feel guilty about something?
Right, and I think that most of the Europeans are wrestling with, am I being true to myself?
Yes.
Am I living up to my own standards, and am I being a hypocrite to what I say and what I believe? You're not necessarily being a hypocrite to some higher power.
They become the judge.
You're the judge.
Yeah.
But there is an incredible weight that comes with that, so that if people don't like you or you're not successful, well, then what is it that you did wrong?
Yeah. So how can we minister to people who make themselves the judge? Because like that happens in Europe. It also happens in America, where it's like, oh, it's all about my self-fulfillment. I'm on my spiritual journey, but like it's just new age nonsense or whatever it is. And so it's like, how do I minister, or how do the listeners, anybody minister to a person who they're just like, I'm just finding myself. I'm just doing what I want.
Living my truth.
Yeah, living my truth.
Yeah, living my truth. You know, what we talk about this a lot in Europe, from Mark chapter 8, verse 35, where Jesus says, if you want to save your life, you got to lose it.
Yeah.
That is the biggest challenge. It's like you got to take up your cross and follow him. You got to die to self.
Yeah.
That right there is, it's a confrontational message.
Yeah.
But there is confrontation in the gospel. The gospel does not come without confrontation because it opposes the mindset of this world.
Yeah.
Okay. Yet it's also a promising. It's a statement or a message that is full of so much promise. Mm-hmm. You can find real life. And I loved how Matt, who's one of our speakers here, was talking about this, not finding balance, but finding center.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
If you want to have a truly centered life, it's not you at the center, it's God at the center, because everything needs to revolve around him. Yeah. And that's the only way to get your life in order.
Yeah, for sure.
In a way that makes sense, because if God is not at the center, then life doesn't make sense. And I feel like that is our message that we keep sharing. And that's how we're reaching people. And that is the message that reaches people. It's how do you get off this hamster wheel, so to speak, of where you're just going in circles, and then you begin to realize that he's the one who should be at the center, and he carries you.
Yeah, because I mean, you're wearing
That's
a shirt
the
right now that
message
says "Lose Yourself."
Yeah.
And so like is that Europe's phrase, Germany?
No, that's Europe. That's
Okay.
that's our call. It's both a battle cry, and it's also a call to a new generation, because for generations people have been coming to Europe to find themselves. But
I've
we're
never
looking
thought about that.
We're looking for a generation to come and lose themselves for His sake and for the gospel.
That's dope.
Yeah, because I mean, I've seen you wear these shirts. I've seen it like printed all over the place, and I've never actually thought about it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, oh yeah, lose yourself. That makes sense. But it's like, Europe is, you hear people all the time like, oh, I'm going to take a gap year and go find myself in Europe.
Exactly.
But actually in the process, you lose who you actually are. Like if
Right.
you're trying to find yourself on your own strength, you lose who you were actually created to be.
Yeah, or you're like a sponge. You just soak up what everybody else is doing around you. And, and it becomes like this mosaic. I think a lot of secularists are mosaics. So they get a little bit of this, they get a little bit of that. You've got a little bit of Eastern religion, throw the cross in there just for good luck. And then I've got my music, and then I've got my, whatever it might be that you're adding to this mosaic that builds who you are, or this image that you project. But you're living from experience to experience, but there is no center except you.
Yeah.
Wow. Dude, that's powerful.
For sure, because then you have people who they like to pull pieces of different religions, and they're like, oh, I respect this, and I respect this religion, and oh yeah, Buddha's cool, Jesus is dope too, but
except for most Europeans would say Christianity is not, because they think
They would say Christianity is not what?
Is not dope, because we've learned that all it did was cause wars.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And suffering.
Definitely.
And injustice, and it propped up the rich and the powerful and the kings and the aristocracy, but the common person.
Yeah.
What did Christianity do for the common person? That you will hear that a lot. That's taught theoretically.
Yeah.
And so you've probably got, but for most Europeans, I would say that a small percentage fall into what we would say is truly an atheist.
Yeah.
Okay? To be secularism does not equal atheism. It is a small percentage who are truly convinced there is no God, and I would say those that are radicalized that say all religious structures should be torn down. So otherwise you can't have peace in society. That's a very small percentage.
We had one on this podcast at one point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of people, they're very pragmatic.
Yeah.
And they're agnostics. They're not going to say there is no God, because how are they going to really prove it? They know that you can't really prove that scientifically because there's too many other coincidences and things that happen in this life to say that definitively. And if you say it definitively, then you're believing in an absolute truth, and you don't want to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you got to
Facts.
keep it fluid. But the majority of people are pragmatic. It's what works.
Yeah.
If it works, if I get a little peace in my life because I go to a church service, I'm going to do that. If I get some peace in my life because I go and I meditate, or I go to something, I've got my feng shui thing happening in the bathroom. At least when I go in there, I'm in my sweet spot, my safe space. That's where most Europeans are at.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So something that I got really passionate about apologetics sometime in college. And so it's like reaching atheists. And then I went to an apologetics conference in New Orleans, and there was a class on apatheism. Have you ever heard that term?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So it's like, it's just like it's not a real worldview, but it's like a actual worldview, in that it's like, so there's like agnostics, atheists, theists, but then there's also apatheists. There are people who would claim like theism, they would claim to be a Christian, or they would claim, oh, I'm an agnostic, or I'm an atheist, but really they just don't care. They're apathetic towards the existence
and I think that's
of
what
God.
I'm meaning by a pragmatic person. It's like they're not going to die on any hill. They're just trying to survive and make it today, and
And to me, that's the most frustrating worldview.
Yes.
Because so how do you reach a person that doesn't care?
Oh, that, and this is the thing. Like we talked when we train new missionaries coming into Europe, we say, you know what, you're not going to be in danger of like landing in jail or dying for your faith. In a sense that the secret police are going to come and get you or something. You're going to die 1,000 deaths of rejection because apathy is what rules in Europe. Wow. And so it really is. It's just, oh man, that's cool for you. Okay. I'm good. You be good with that. You do your thing. You do you, I do me. Mm-hmm. That's this apatheism that you're talking about. And that is so frustrating. And that's what we have to tell people is just, you're going to get frustrated. The spiritual warfare is different.
Yeah.
It's that it's like nobody wants to listen to you.
Yeah.
Or they think you're a relic left over from the Middle Ages. It's like, what?
Look at this idiot.
Yeah.
Right. And so then, like, I've struggled when I've dealt with people who are apathetic that, like, and I just feel like they don't care. So I just become so tempted to want to, like, tell them about, like, a heaven and hell gospel. Because it's like, you don't care.
You don't care. So
like,
I'm going to give you both
I'm
barrels.
I'm going to show you something that you should care about is your eternity. But that's not the center of the gospel. You know, the center of the gospel is Jesus is a good king.
No, and firing both barrels at them and just like, you might feel better because you're like, well, I told you. At least I told you the gospel. Like, I've done my part.
Yeah.
But really, you haven't, because that wasn't good news to them.
Wow.
That was you just throwing something religious at them. Good news to them is that, wow, somebody who disagreed with me or somebody is going to love me and truly be a friend and walk with me.
Wow.
That represents God. There is a God out there who doesn't just want me to respond to his religion, but he wants relationship with me, and that begins with us. And I think that's how you reach apathetic people, is that you're not apathetic. They matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they matter so much that you don't give up on them.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you stick with it.
Yeah.
And you stick with what you preach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They watch you. They want to know, do you really practice what you preach?
Right, because if you don't like the good news, I'm gonna tell you the bad news. But like that's not.
You're just confirming all their biases
Exactly.
against
That's so
Christianity.
wrong. That's
Exactly.
that's
Exactly.
wrong. Wow.
Because, like,
wow.
We have those street preachers who come to campus and they're like, you're all going to hell. And so it's like, I went and talked to one not long ago. I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. It never does. But it's just like, he's like, all these people are walking to hell, so I'm just going to yell at them to stop. And it's just like, I understand why you're saying that.
Right.
But like, how many people are listening to you? You're just confirming every negative view of Christianity. And, I mean, you're the reason. A lot of people like that are the reason there's a negative view.
Right.
And it's just like, that's not how we reach those people who are far from God. It's to level with them and show them that we care about them, and by that they will see that God loves them.
Well, and because I feel like for most people, there are certain thresholds that they're going to cross as they come to faith.
Yeah.
And one of those thresholds is that they build trust with a believer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That even, and that means even getting to the point that if they reject the gospel, will you still love them and be their friend?
Yeah.
And they're testing that.
Yeah,
That's
Sometimes we think, oh man, the devil's working overtime on them, but really that's just the process. That's the human condition. They're testing you. They're checking to see if you're still going to stick with them, even when they reject things. Kids do this to their parents.
Yeah.
This is not new. And yet we forget that this is the human heart when we get to these places, because we think, oh, it's going to be step 1, 2, and 3.
preaching.
They're testing it.
Man, like, because you also don't want to sit, I feel like, please stop me at any point. You also don't want to sit in a fruitless environment, and you don't want to keep watering a plant that doesn't want water, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like,
and when
I've struggled with that.
Right, and when you're in full-time ministry, and this is what your job is, your occupation, you're in vocational ministry, there is this expectation of success and fruit. And one of the other things we tell new missionaries is you've got to change your expectations of success, because this is not like one of our speakers, saying there was an open window over in Argentina in the 1980s. We're not in an open window situation right now.
Yeah.
So
Wait,
it's going to, so like where it's almost like the heavens are open and no matter what you do, everybody's going to get saved.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay,
We're not in that moment right now in Europe. We have it
Yeah.
in small pockets. There's like a few pockets of revival, but not really like what
not
we've
like
seen in other
nationwide.
places.
Yeah.
It's not like what we're seeing in the Southern Hemisphere, in parts of Africa and in Latin America. And so I feel like we put pressure on ourselves. I got to have something to write in a newsletter.
It's like, I need somebody to say yes to Jesus.
I need a soundbite. I need somebody. Either that's to feel better about myself, or because people are going to think I'm not doing my job, or I'm not a very effective minister. It's like, you look at some of the prophets, man, they were preaching for years and nobody listened to them, and nobody would say Isaiah or Jeremiah was that they were unsuccessful. If you measured it by world standards, nobody listened to them, and everything fell apart. But they were obedient, and they did what God called them to do.
That's powerful.
Man, because we were talking about that last night, and how I've struggled with being a high school teacher, man. I feel like the Lord is blessing me, and I'm trying to minister to students. But this is my 4th year being there, and the fruit is just like, I think I've had one person like that I've actually been able to like disciple, you know, and it's like, brother, it feels so fruitless, you know, and it's like, but I feel like the Lord like humbled me last night and was like, are you willing to water plants that will not bear fruit in your lifetime or in your view?
Yeah.
And it's like, I want to say yes.
Yep.
You know, but that's difficult. And I do want to think through that before I just like, yeah, I'm cool with it. You know, because I feel like you have to get to a certain level of spiritual maturity. And I guess, have you ever like encountered a struggle within that, and kind of how did you come out of that, if that's ever happened for you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You have to, sometimes you got to really take a step back and just get a right perspective, whether that's God either just meets you in your one-on-one time with him and he reminds you of that. But oftentimes it's somebody else who's wiser, more mature, more experienced, who comes alongside of you, puts their arm around you, and they say, hey, it's okay. Think about it this way. And they help you get a right perspective. Yeah. And I think both those things have come into play in my life when I found myself in that situation.
Yeah. Sure. Because it's like, I think any person who follows Jesus, who has made disciples or is trying, there's times where it's like we're trying so hard for a person. And when they're just kind of like consistently rejecting,
right, we
give up.
Right.
And you're like, hey, that's not the time to give up. That's the time to keep persevering in relationship. It's like, because if you just abandon them the second they reject the gospel, they're like, you don't love me.
Right.
You want me for a number.
Exactly.
And people feel that. Like, whether they cognitively could say, oh, he just wants a number.
Right.
Like, they feel that in their nervous system of like, he doesn't actually care and love me.
Well, I mean, if we can get practical, you know, we just talk about it like, man, just doing small group ministry in Chi Alpha. And so obviously all of us have a certain capacity, you know, so as a small group leader, there's a capacity. Yeah. Let's say your capacity is 10 people, right? You know, because you're doing school, work, and all that. So say your capacity is 10 people, and like, see, some people are faithful, some people come to life group, and some people don't. Right. Do you just keep that 10 and then you just work on that 10 for that year? Or like, if like, I don't know, like I get what you mean. Wondering how do you, something that's been important to me as I've grown, just like with college, was like energy management. Yeah. And making sure that I manage my energy well, and that I still have like enough energy to do the things that I need to do to take care of myself, as well as doing ministry well. And so from my perspective and receiving what you're saying, it's like, do I just have that 10 and I just don't give up on that 10 and I just focus on that because there's a maximum capacity. I can't minister to 30 people and live life with 30 people effectively as one person. So like, how do I navigate that tension of, you know, wanting to be faithful with that 10 that I have, but like not seeing fruit, and then maybe there's another one I could reach. I don't know. That's just kind of some raw thoughts I'm having, and I didn't know if you had anything to.
No, I think, you know, I've often encouraged students. I use it in the terms of pastoring and discipling, and pastoring of using that more of a shepherd type thing, especially for small group leaders. You got 10 people in your group. Some of them, it's just going to be more like you're pouring more into them, and that's what I mean by the discipling thing. Like you're investing a lot more energy there than somebody who's not receiving as much. If somebody is turning a deaf ear to you, or they don't seem to be coming along, it's like you don't give up on them, but you just keep nudging them along, like that shepherd crook, in that sense of like, just, you know, I'm maintaining a relationship with you, but I just can't, you know, you're not spending as much time. Yeah, especially when you start talking about time, because we all have just a limited capacity. Sure. And so I think that it's identifying or beginning to learn what is my capacity for how many people I can really intensely pour into and disciple, and then those that I'm at this other level of relationship with, that's something that I've found helpful for me. That may or may not be helpful for others to think of it in those terms. But I feel like we've all only got so much to go around. Yeah. And to identify that is a good sign of maturity, that you know yourself as a leader, and you know what you can do and how you can invest in people. Yeah.
Wow. I'm sure. No, that's good. That definitely makes it like easier to understand, because it's like, because I didn't know if that counts as giving up on someone, not still pursuing intentional discipleship with them. Yeah. And so that's not giving up on them.
I don't see it as giving up.
Okay.
I see it as, even like, is this person, it's almost like when you look in the New Testament, you see different levels of relationship, even with like, you see Paul, Timothy, and Titus, and it's like, who's his Timothy?
Yeah.
But then he always is listing off all sorts of people's names, and I just don't think that he was spending the exact same amount of time and investment in others, because those others, for whatever reason it might be. And then even later you get Paul saying things like, well, this guy abandoned and this guy dropped out and that guy left. And so I think he was wrestling through those same issues. It's not that he had it all perfect. I think he was wrestling with it too.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's really good.
Great perspective.
Yeah. And this is kind of changing gears, but something I wanted to ask you about is, so I'm assuming, I'm pretty sure it's in Germany. Y'all have this pay what you want coffee shop.
Yes.
So explain the mission of that and how y'all have used something like a business to spread Jesus.
Sure. I think business's mission is a great tool for us in missions today all around the world. One, it's about access. In a lot of places, we can't get into countries without having a business platform for visa purposes.
Yeah.
So you establish a business that is a legitimate business that's adding value to the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whether that is an English school or English language school, or it might be, I've got some friends that, some Kafa friends that are up at the foothills of the Himalayas, right? Like on this main trekking path where people go hiking.
Yeah.
And they've started a freeze-dried snacks and food company.
Okay.
And they're bagging it. They're making it, they're bagging it, and they're selling it to hikers. Yeah. And they're building relationships right there, and they're also employing local people.
Wow.
Okay, that's one way of doing it. It's about access, visa access. Yeah. The other thing that we're doing in a lot of places in Europe, we use business's mission as just another platform, because most people will never darken the doorway of a traditional church setting. They may not come to a small group Bible study. They wouldn't come to anything that is overtly religious, but they will walk into a cafe. And so our vision behind Heart and Soul was that we would have a place that is connected to our ministry and connected to our church, but is also like a standalone.
Yeah.
Okay. So that when people come in, they are the people who serve in that cafe and who work there, they're all part of our ministry team.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that means that the people who are walking in to get their latte or their cappuccino are encountering people who are born again.
Yes.
And for many of them, it's probably the first time in their life that they're going to encounter somebody that's truly born again.
Yeah.
And that's who's working our cafe. Well, our whole philosophy behind it was, this is a donation-based cafe, and we don't charge for the hot drinks. So now if you buy a sandwich or you buy soup or something, like, you're going to pay for that. Okay. So there's a set price for that. For sure. Or you buy the t-shirt that's in the store, kind of thing. But if it's the hot drinks, and that's the main thing. I mean, it's a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Then we tell people, hey, we ask them when they come in, hey, have you been here before? No, this is my first time. I say, hey, well, this is the Pay What You Want cafe. What do you mean? Well, we do this on donation basis. And almost everybody goes, why?
Yeah.
So that's your immediate opener.
I'm glad you asked.
I'm glad you asked. And
have you heard about Jesus? No.
and we don't always say the same. We don't say the same thing every time. But one way of responding is that, like, hey, well, this is actually run by a Christian church, and we want. We believe that everybody in our community should be able to get in on something good like coffee. So that means those who can afford to give more, and those who can only afford to give a little, they still can get a good cup of coffee and be able to participate. And we'll say that kind of reflects Jesus, because Jesus is all about everybody getting in on his goodness. Yeah. And we want to reflect that. And so those are just the little openers. And almost to a T, people are like, oh, well, man, what's the average donation? And we'll tell them, and then they maybe double it, or they'll maybe give more, those that can. And what that does is then that's not only an income stream for ministry, but that is a place where people come in and meet believers who are basically baristas for Jesus. That's the idea.
I feel that because, when I was at UL, I ran the coffee bar.
Exactly.
My biggest, this is funny. When I was the manager of the coffee shop, we had an international student, was not a Christian.
Yeah.
He wanted to be a barista. I was like, hey, look, I got a willing soul. Come on, get back there. And then he cursed out a customer. I was like, yeah, you're done. I'm sorry, bro. This is a Christian coffee shop. You can't be cursing out customers.
Right. Well, and so like we had a girl that came in. She was a new student. She came in. She's also an international student. Came from the Czech Republic. And my wife, Amy, was working the counter when she walked in. And she was actually looking for a job. She needed a part-time job. Mm-hmm. And we didn't hire everybody. We have a lot of volunteers that work there as well. And she said, are you guys hiring? Amy said, no, but we do take volunteers. And then she said, well, tell me more about. And so Amy explained the philosophy, talking about how this is, we want to do what Jesus would do. And then the girl goes, oh man, I'll probably find a part-time job somewhere else, but I just love the whole vibe here. And I love what you're doing. Mm-hmm. She goes, but you just need to know this. I'm an atheist. Mm-hmm. Would you be okay with me, volunteering here? And Amy said, absolutely. Come be a part of our team.
Yeah.
And so then she joined our team. She was actually one of the friendliest and most smiling baristas that we had. And she was there on our team. And then eventually she started coming to small group. Then she started coming to our coffee meeting. Then she started coming to church. And then she made friends with Jesus.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful how something like in the minds of like the average American Christian, they would never think to start a pay what you want coffee shop, but it's like something even just through a business stream.
Yep.
Like you have seen people encounter Christ. And I think like to anyone that can be an encouragement. It doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, use it to the glory of God.
Right.
Like find those ways to be like, hey, let me tell you about Jesus, but more so, let me show you about Jesus. Because like, that's the model it's like, this is the model of what Christ would do. And we're going to show you that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so I did want to ask, what was the thought process in being okay with an atheist serving at a coffee shop that, what the intention is Christ? So, cause I feel like there's gotta be some risk with having somebody that doesn't carry the core values of the company, organization, Yeah,
absolutely. But as long as she can agree to not work in opposition, then greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world.
Sure.
So why not bring her into the boat?
Yeah.
That's the idea. That, okay, you know what? As long as somebody is not going to be working against you, in saying anything negative or doing something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's not every, and there's a difference of philosophy and
of
opinions
course,
on this.
Of course. Sure.
But we have always found that when we include more people that aren't yet in the kingdom, I'm moving them closer to the
I
kingdom.
mean, the proof's in the pudding. You've had people give their life to Jesus as atheists who are
Right.
baristas.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. No, that's really good. And so it's just like, if you could bring one word of wisdom to the listener, but I want you to think of it through this lens. If you could go back to Kirk, you've been in ministry 30 years?
Yeah.
So 30 years ago, you could go back to Kirk and tell him one piece of advice for living for Jesus, being a minister. What would that be?
I think it's preparation. We get things, we take things out of the oven too soon. And they're not always done all the way through.
Yeah.
They may look good on the outside.
Sure.
But you cut into that loaf of bread and it's still a little bit spongy on the
Yeah.
inside,
Yeah.
And I feel like all too often we feel, and maybe this just comes with age. When you're 20, you feel like if I don't get going right now, my whole life's going to be wasted. And it's kind of like we're always in such a big yank to get started that I feel like we short circuit the preparation process.
Wow.
Joseph did incredible things because he spent years in Potiphar's house and in prison.
Yeah.
And I feel like all too often, when we're young, we're ready to get out there, but I feel like put more emphasis on preparation. I wish I could go back and say, you could do this, but do you need to do it now?
Yeah.
Maybe wait a year on that one.
Yeah.
So that you could spend more time, you could read more, learn more, grow more, pray more, and be prepared for it.
Wow.
Wow.
No, that's good. I think that's a word for anity. No matter whether you're 20 or whether you're 50.
I needed to.
Yeah.
Boy, you don't know how bad I needed to hit it. Like, cause where I'm at right now, I'm at a crossroads. And this next week is gonna be like a really, really, really big week for me and my wife and our decision making. Like we're just getting a house, and then my pastor, he was talking to me about serving more in the church and stepping up and doing it. And I went to him about that and saying that I want to do that. But I coached high school football last fall, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I would say that was the 3 months of coaching were probably the 3 worst months of my marriage, or me as a husband. That was my, easily in the 3 years we've been married. And so it's like, obviously there's, there's growth that can happen to maybe potentially do it again. And so my whole thing was next week I have to decide whether I'm going to pursue the serving in the ministry or coaching again. And my head coach texted me yesterday. He was like, "Yeah, Derek, so what you doing?" And I was like, I'm going to get back to you. And my thing was, I was going to wait for my pastor to see if he's going to offer me the job or not. If he doesn't offer me the job, I'm a coach. If he doesn't offer me the job, I'm a coach. If he does offer me the job, then I'm not going to coach. And I feel like that's me just trying to jump from season to season to do something. And meanwhile, I'm not preparing for anything. That, I have these opportunities, and it's I'm gonna just wait for the opportunity and then just do that. And it's I forget that I can prepare for the next opportunity that God has. That even if my pastor says no, I don't need to coach. I can take time and preparation to be ready for the next time I do have a call to ministry, or the next time God does have me in a more organized capacity in ministry. And that my entire life, I've always just gone from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing, and rarely taken time to prepare for the next season in my life.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I really felt like that was really powerful. And I think some other people need to hear that it's okay to be in a preparation season, and you do not have to jump from task to task, season to season.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Sure thing, man.
Well, thank you so much for carving out time. I know you got to preach tonight, so you're a busy man, and we appreciate you.
Oh, guys,
taking
this was
time.
awesome spending time with you and chatting about this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and so we end every episode. I'll say, and as always, go encounter the kingdom of God, and then we all point at the phone and say, everywhere you go. All right, you got it? And as always, go encounter the kingdom of God everywhere you go.